This Age of Wonders 4 Open Beta is nothing short of game-changing, and in this video I'd like to take you through the highlights, the big things that they're playing around with to shift Age of Wonders 4 meta completely on its head. My name's JumboPixel, and with our YouTube housekeeping aside, let's jump straight into the video, and we're starting with research scaling. This, of course, we're confronted with it from the very beginning of a game, and what they've basically done is said, hey, research was too cheap. You were able to research too many tomes, too many spells, improvements, whatever, far too quickly. And so to get around that, the cost of the skills inside of tomes has changed. Instead of the tier of the skill determining its cost, the cost is now based on the amount of tomes that you've collected so far. So if you've bursted through and researched a lot of tomes, a lot of skills and unlocks, then they'll be more expensive. And you can see that it scales actually quite aggressively upwards. I think, if anything, it could actually be a little bit too aggressive. I think certainly research was too easy earlier. Now it could potentially be a little bit difficult. But of course, a reminder that this is an open beta available on Steam. They're very much still adding to this. It's a work in progress, and they make that really clear. So I'd expect to see more changes here, but overall, we're seeing a more expensive research system, particularly once you get up to your 11th, 12th, 13th tome at an extra 1,000 knowledge. The next change, maybe the biggest one of all, at least right up there with research, is the magic victory. It's been reworked. It was too boring and too easy, at least according to common community feedback, and now what they've done is they've basically linked it to golden ancient wonders. Those wonders that appear around the map at tier 3 out of 3 or strength 3 out of 3. The most significant ones. You won't be able to break them early on. They've binded it to those instead of the things that we used to have to build in our cities. Used to have to build 3 monuments and defend them. Now you have to connect and annex gold ancient wonders and defend those. Once you get to a tier 3 tome is where it really starts to kick off. This unlocks a global research skill that's called Bind Gold Ancient Wonder. And then when you unlock a tier 5 tome, you can research the Age of Affinity spell like we used to, cast it across the map, so long as you have enough of those golden ancient wonders bound. The finisher works basically the same as it did before, but now you have to defend your bound golden wonders, those wonders that you've cast a spell on, and of course annex. They have to be within your cities. And now you won't need to say so much just sit around and defend 3 structures that perfectly border one another in your city. So not only can we not build these things ourselves, we are essentially beholden to where they spawn in the world, but also they're harder to capture. We're not just building things, we actually have to go out and take wonders. This is potentially a very significant rework, and that's why I wanted to spend a lot of time on it here at the start of the video. I should also note one other thing that they mentioned, or a couple of small caveats. Firstly, the number of golden ancient wonders scales based on map size, as you might expect. Global spells are separate research picks, so they'll be separate from the 3 random ones that you get. And lastly, they've also disabled the independent armies that attack you during the final phase of victory. Since your empire will be much more spread out to capture all of the ancient wonders, the AI-controlled enemy rulers should be able to try and stop us now instead. So that's just another way how it's different from the expansion victory now. This one is very exciting, and it's one of actually the changes that I like the most. Now, observant viewers in this video will notice this one especially because we're playing in an underground world, or at least an underground spawn. There are lots of map changes that have been introduced inside of this beta, and most significantly, it's about the underground. First though, at a high level, they've kind of reworked map generation a little bit. There's now player distance has become relative map size, and there's a very large setting, so you can increase that distance between players. Crucially though, let's talk about the underground. So cities can now annex provinces on the opposite layer through these underground passages that you'll see stand out even more so thanks to a myriad of small changes. And by the way, there are a shitload of those. It seems to be a common thing that there are a myriad of UI changes, the way that the game looks, plays, animates itself with every update. But putting that to one side, the underground passages now essentially work as bridges between the underground and the traditional world. And by that I mean, if you annex a territory with one of those underground passages, you can then annex the territory above or below it. So my city here, now that it's grabbed an underground passage, will be able to expand into the overworld, and you'll see that happen throughout the video. This is a massive thing in actually helping to sort of both buff the underground, but also connect it better with the rest of the game, because I always felt like you're basically just at a disadvantage down there. Your tiles are generally worse. Yes, you can specialize, but you can specialize anywhere, so that doesn't really set it apart. It just didn't have enough power, and so it's nice to see it more connected. They also changed a few other things. For example, they removed the roaming marauder armies that can spawn when you excavate Earth. So you won't find a red evil enemy when you smash some of the underground like I'm doing in this gameplay. If you do find enemies, they won't actively run out and try and fight you like these dudes here. They'll just sit there and wait for me to fight them, right? They're not actively enraged. That's a relatively small thing, but it matters. Excavating Earth can now also reveal guarded nodes and infestations, so you can still get some aggression in rare circumstances. It's a first pass at improving the generation process, but they've also specifically improved the placement of cave passages, so the underground is now also more interconnected. And indeed, I've noticed that in this gameplay too. More space to build, easier to connect with other players underground, and easier to build connections with the real world, for lack of a better word. Great to see some map changes here, and a brief mention that the continents map generation is also more varied now. Smaller islands will form, and I noticed that in my limited testing too. It's actually much more fun. Perhaps slightly less fun, although arguably very needed, changes to spell casting and summoning, and largely these are nerfs. Firstly, on the spell casting, so actually how many you can cast is being changed. Traditionally, and this is apparently especially an issue in multiplayer, we've been able to cast multiple spells per turn on the world map, whether that's terraforming, changing yields in a city, or whatever else you're doing on the world map. The devs claim that this undermines strategic gameplay, allowing players to obliterate any enemy army with stacking damage spells. Totally agree, quite exploitative in that example, or rapidly heal. To combat it, what they've done is said that you can only cast one spell per turn, limiting the casting of combat spells on the world map. You can increase it to 2 with the channeling chamber building in the Wizard's Tower, but by and large, it is now limited to 1. And I wonder if that, just speaking to my own experience with the update, is a slight overreach. I think using the example of, say, something like terraforming, maybe I could cast that on my own territories more than once a turn. I don't know if it's that much of a stretch, but I can definitely see it with stacking damage spells repeat over and over and over again. I've used that myself perhaps a little bit on infestations, so perhaps it's a necessary change, and I think it'll probably pull the system into a better way of balance, more harmony. And speaking of harmony, summoning spells, actually how we target them, is changing too. As you may know at the moment, summoning spells are awesome because you can target any hex on the map and summon in a unit, paying a little bit of mana upkeep or whatever it may be to keep it alive. This has, as the developers noted, led players to favoring summoning units over units constructed in cities, because we can just spam them out wherever we like. To fix it, they've changed the summoning rules so that we can now only summon units either in hexes adjacent to our cities or on our ruler's army. Just our ruler's army, I would note. This makes it that we'll be able to still use some magic to reinforce our main army or our cities, but by and large now, you're probably going to have to walk your summoned units around. So a little bit of a tactical debuff there on where we can place them and how we can place them, although arguably it does make our specific hero ruler a little bit more important now. Speaking of heroes, not just the ruler, but all of them, they've received some necessary changes as well to upkeep and to their items. A couple of juicy changes. Firstly, let's talk upkeep. When you break the maximum hero cap, each hero costs 30 gold per turn upkeep. It was intentional to make it expensive so that we'd only break that in terms of emergencies. However, let's be real, that's not much of a cost. Very easy to break over that, and generally a good idea to do so. So to get around that, they've changed the penalty so that it's now 15% of your gross gold income. It means that upkeep you pay for your hero over the cap will scale as your empire grows, making it much more dangerous, basically. If you're playing the Chosen Destroyers or Mega Cities, then you'll unlock a new line of buildings that you can build in your Throne City to increase your hero cap without acquiring another city, by the way, making that Mega City or Chosen Destroyer playthrough a little bit more viable by essentially decoupling the cities and hero caps. On the topic of heroes, their item has been changed as well. There's what they call a hero item limbo. I would maybe call it more of a cooldown. Basically, there's an exploit that exists where you can teleport items around between heroes as much as you like, allowing heroes to, for example, share, say, a flying mount, allowing them to move across the world quickly, or you can transfer items across between heroes for fights, right? So I can fight you in the east with all my items, and then I can quickly transfer them over to another hero and fight you in the west. To get around that, they've introduced a limbo or a cooldown system. Basically, you can't just instantly transfer an item. Removing an item from one equipment slot goes into limbo for a turn. While it's in limbo, it can't be equipped to another hero. It doesn't generate income for Dragon's Horde mechanics either. I think this is a necessary change to basically just get around the exploit of swapping things around to different heroes. Feels a little bit cheesy, not something I'm personally a fan of, and it's nice to see them mopping that up. Is it slightly aggressive maybe with the single turn cooldown and not making money? Potentially, could be tuned down a little bit, but I think this is moving in the right direction. Now, in the last major update, they basically did nothing to the AI, and then they said, hey, hold on, we're working on it. You'll see it in the next update and the one after. And now we have some detail. Not, I should add, on the Steam page. There was almost no detail about the AI there, but delving into the forums a little bit, there's some juicy stuff. Firstly, they've rebalanced difficulties, making them harder by basically starving us of cash. They've removed unit upkeep and unit cost discounts from the normal difficulty, so that discount is gone. They've also removed unit cost discount from hard and very hard. And then the other thing they've done is they've reduced the unit upkeep discounts on those hard and very hard difficulties roughly in half. So you'll be paying more money for your units in general. They've also changed the unit production logic. The AI will no longer always produce units. Instead, it'll try and keep up with the strongest human player. So it's got its baseline, the point that it's working towards, much more refined, much more focused than it used to, which was basically just spam out units. Once the AI's done that, by the way, it then has to try and have at least X percentage more army power than a human player. And this is how they scale it with difficulty. So on easy level, for example, it wants to be 5% stronger than you. This scales right the way up through to very hard, where they want to be 40% stronger than you. By the way, at normal, they'll look to be 20% stronger. So there's an interesting way, not just how the AI builds and produces units, but also then, of course, what else it can do with its money, now that it's maybe saving a bit of cash. They've also changed defense logic, disbanding logic, and the AI summoning logic. I'll put all of that on screen for you here so that you can take a look and see the specific changes. I won't delve into each and every single one. I think that that's probably not the best use of our time. But some quick highlights. In tactical combat, the AI will use a wider variety of spells. They've also changed the rule regarding clearing ancient wonders. The AI will now clear them when they're in annex range to their cities or outposts. Thank goodness. They've also changed the economic focus so that the AI will stop replacing gold, mana, resource improvements, providing an overall more stable and stronger economy. And all of those rules around summoning, disbanding have been significantly improved. So on a technical level, on a mechanical level, we've seen changes to percentage multipliers, making generally speaking, our armies more expensive and making the AI's army more refined, potentially stronger and closely aligned to where it needs to be. And then on the practical sense, the way that the AI thinks, how it disbands units, tile improvements, territory improvements, that kind of thing has changed too. Let me know below if you've played around with the beta on Steam and if you've experienced these AI changes in particular, because of course, unlike some of the other changes, these ones are sometimes harder to sort of manage and harder to measure. So I'd love your feedback on those. And there are actually a whole load of other small or things that have changed in isolation that have big impacts. One of them that isn't in isolation because the research functions were changed, as we discussed at the start of the video, are the Tomes of Magic. There were several balancing changes. One, for example, the Zephyr Archer, the shot damage has been reduced from 34 to 30, and it's no longer a slippery unit. Now that's just one example. The Tier 1 Horde Tome, Spawnkin, now gives 10% evasion to heroes instead of extra damage. Big changes, and then of course a whole load of little ones, so I won't delve into each one. But overall I wanted to note that tomes now always give +5 casting points, spell casting points, regardless of their tier. Previously it used to be that Tier 3 and 4 tomes would give you +10. Tier 5 tomes would give you an extra 15 spell casting points, but anything below Tier 3 would give you nothing. Now that's been kind of rebalanced. Each tome gives +5. A nice change. A quick note on some other world map changes outside of the underground. The Wizard Tower building doesn't function as a spelljammer anymore, so you'll actually need to build spelljammers now instead of just relying on Wizard Towers. And some of the magic materials have changed a little bit too. Generally speaking, buffs except for the Lucky Clover, which loses its Imperium income. Now, all of the rest of the changes, and there are quite a few that they've already made, rebalancing certain units from dragons to dire penguins, right the way through the Tomes of Magic that we've already discussed, and of course some interface changes that you will have seen. But that, my friends, will conclude today's video. It is a Steam open beta, so anyone can access it by navigating to Age of Wonders in your Steam, right-click Properties, then go to the Betas tab and select the open beta. You'll be able to jump in and play. Sorry to our console friends, unfortunately for you, you won't see these changes until they are firstly made official, because a reminder that this is still subject to change, and secondly rolled out when the official update rolls through later this summer. Thanks for watching.